Hi, everybody. My name is Cathy Lucrezi. I'm a supervising attorney at Legal Aid Service of Collier County. I'm very happy to be here today to talk to you about Social Security benefits. This is the first of a series of these lunch and learn sessions that deal with Social Security. Today, I wanted to go over the basics of some of the disability claims that people make. In the future, we're going to be doing a session on how to prove your case to Social Security, what to do if the Social Security office tells you there's an overpayment, and what happens once you start receiving benefits and Social Security says, we're going to cut you off. That's in the future. Today, we're talking about the difference between SSDI and SSI. One of the things that Social Security is famous for is using acronyms, lots of alphabet soup. And part of the challenge of dealing with Social Security is being able to navigate those alphabets. Today, you'll learn two key programs and their names, SSDI and SSI. First, let me tell you a little bit about legal aid. Legal Aid Service of Collier County is a nonprofit law firm. We provide free legal services to individuals who live in Collier County and who have civil legal problems. We don't do any kind of criminal or things like that. It's all civil. We believe that we provide a safety net for our community. People that would not otherwise have access to the courts are able to get their day in court with our assistance. We have a large staff both in Naples and in Immokalee. And at the end of this presentation, you'll see some phone numbers and web addresses where you can reach us if you need us. Again, we serve all of Collier County, from downtown Naples all the way out to some of those little towns that I don't even know how to pronounce. But if you're in Collier County, then you may be eligible for our services. A person who believes they need some help from legal aid should call our office and ask to see if for an appointment to be screened. Everybody who calls is screened for eligibility. I'm going to let that alone for now because I want to dive into the Social Security part of this. As we go through this, if you have questions that come up, use the chat function in the Zoom to let us know, and I'll try to address all of them. Let me start with a little bit of history of Social Security. It hasn't been around forever, but pretty close. It was signed into law by President Roosevelt in 1935. That's when they started the collection of the taxes that would fund Social Security. The first time that they made a lump sum was in 1937, and they didn't start the practice of doing monthly benefits until 1940. At first, Social Security only dealt with retirement, nothing to do with disability or anything like that, and only retirement for the primary worker. In 1939, the law was changed to add survivor's benefits, meaning that if the worker dies and has left a widow or widower or children, it's possible for those individuals to get some of those retirement benefits. It wasn't until 1956 that Social Security started to pay out benefits for disabled people. So what's the difference between SSDI and SSI? Social Security Disability Insurance is what SSDI stands for. Supplemental Security Income is SSI. They're very different, but they're the same in some respects, and that's what we'll learn today. Sometimes people say, well, I get disability. And I, as an attorney, will then ask, what kind of disability? Because I want to know, are you getting SSDI or SSI. Many people don't know, but usually we can figure it out. When you get a letter from Social Security about your monthly benefits, in the upper left-hand corner is something that will say either Social Security or supplemental security income, and that's the clue. So, but usually if you tell me how much you're making or how much you're receiving in benefits, I can usually figure it out from there. But they're two very different ones, and when they become the same, we'll get into that. SSDI is based on your work record. It pays benefits to you and certain family members if you are insured, and we'll talk about what that means. But in order to get SSDI, you have to have worked a particular amount of time to be eligible. And it's available for anyone who has worked and is now disabled. SSI pays benefits to disabled adults and children who have limited income and assets. In other words, even if you haven't worked a day in your life, you may be eligible for SSI because it is geared towards people who are most in need of financial assistance. So for SSI, Social Security will ask lots of questions about who else lives in your household, how much do they make, all that sort of stuff. So again, SSDI is based on a work record. Doesn't matter how much you make. And SSI does matter how much money you make, how much you own, all that sort of stuff. Now, this is a good point for me to say. Everything I tell you has a loophole. Social Security is notorious for being filled with bureaucratic hurdles to jump over. And so every time I say they pay benefits if you're insured, and I'll tell you what that means, they're going to say, well, except in this situation, or except this, or only if you do this. And that's true for everything in Social Security. There's always some little loophole. And what I would suggest is maybe it's best not to try to figure it out yourself. If you think you might be eligible, call Social Security, make an application, because it would be impossible to figure it out on your own. So let's first talk about SSDI and this idea about whether you're insured. An insured person, meaning that you're covered by Social Security disability insurance, an insured person has to have worked at least 40 Social Security credits in the past 10 years. And that's a very generalized statement. It gets more specific. Social Security credits are basically a way that they measure how much you've been working. A credit is generally equal to 1/4 of the year. So you can earn 4 credits in any 1 year. And when you apply for SSDI, they first look to see if you're insured. And they will look at when you last worked, how long you've been working. You know, you may have started working when you were a teenager. Now you're 55, and they've got a record of every one of those. So you have to have at least 40 credits, and the 40 credits have to be recent, meaning that they have to be, generally speaking, they have to be within the last 10 years. I've put on the screen a couple of exceptions for younger individuals, but basically it's 20 credits in the 10 years prior to the start of your disability. This is one of those things where don't try to figure it out yourself. Call Social Security. Like I said, they've got a record of everything. So let me go over this one more time with examples. If you, let's say you're now 55 and you started working when you were 20 and you've worked continuously since you were 20, then you have worked for 35 years. you definitely meet the 40 credit requirement. And let's say that you stopped working just 2 months ago. Well, that's definitely within the 10 years prior to the start of your disability. So you're good to go. On the other hand, let's say you're 55, you started to work when you were 20, but then you stopped working for whatever reason when you were 30. Well, you probably have enough credits, but they're stale. They're too old to have you be insured. Again, don't try to figure it out yourself. If you think you might be eligible for SSDI, call Social Security and make the application. If they decide that you are insured, they will go on to the next steps to figure out if you're eligible for disability benefits. If you're not insured, Social Security will look at all of its other programs to see if you might qualify. In other words, when you call Social Security to make an application, you don't have to remember anything I'm telling you really about SSDI, SSI, anything like that. You don't have to tell them about your quarters or how recent they are. They will figure it out. If you call up and say, oh, I want to apply for benefits, they will take it from there. They'll figure out where you might fit into the plan. There are a lot of people that apply for both SSDI and SSI, but that's another story. So let's talk about SSI. SSI, it stands for Supplemental Security Income. And remember, this is the one that is dependent on someone having a low income, not owning very much. And so the basic criteria here doesn't deal anything with a work record, doesn't deal anything with work credits, but you have to be either 65 or blind or disabled. Now we're going to focus mostly on that disabled part for the rest of this presentation. But SSI is for people who are 65, blind, or disabled. Person has to have a limited income. They have to have limited assets. They have to reside in one of the 50 states. They have to be a U.S. citizen or in a certain category of non-citizens. And this is one of the places where Social Security gets very, very complicated. They are very specific about which non-citizens are eligible and which are not. For instance, if you immigrated from Cuba between 1964 and 1978, you might be eligible. But if you came here from Cuba after 1978, you might not be. Or I tell you, the regulation book is filled with these little rules that this non-citizen is eligible, this non-citizen is not. So again, don't try to figure it out yourself. Call Social Security, apply, let them figure it out. If you are not a citizen and you apply for Social Security, they will ask you what your immigration card number is. They will, check that out. They are not INS. They will not share that information with anybody else. They keep it all in-house. But you do need to be prepared to show what your status is in the United States. I can tell you that I had one individual, not a citizen, but who was from, I can't even remember the name, some island in the Pacific, who came to the United States in the early 2000s. And there was this little loophole where she fit in. But if she had come like just a few years earlier or a few years later, she wouldn't have been eligible. I'm not going to pretend that it makes sense, but that's your Congress at work doing that stuff. The other thing I would want to mention about that is that SSI is generally not available to non-citizens for a period of time. So even if you met all the other criteria, if you came to the United States yesterday, you might have to wait a period of 5 years before you can be considered eligible for SSI, even if you meet all the other criteria. So again, what are you going to do if you think you meet these things? You're going to call Social Security. Don't say to yourself, oh, I'll never be eligible. Call them, check it out. The eligibility for supplemental security income gets very, very complicated. You know, what do they count as income? What do they count as an asset? If you live in your house and that you don't own any other property, your house is not considered an asset that will be counted against you. If you live in your house, or if you have a bank account of $20,000, they're going to count about 15,000 of that as an asset. If you have more than one property, for sure they're going to count the property where you don't have your primary residence as an asset. You can work while you get SSI, but if you earn too much, you're going to run into a problem, because Social Security will say, well, if you can work full time, you know, you're not disabled. So we'll get into a little bit more on that point later on, but there is a way to work and still get SSI. They'll ask lots of questions about your home situation. You know, do you share space? Do you pay rent? If you live in a house with other family members, are you paying rent to them? Are you contributing to the cost of the household? That sort of thing. They'll ask if you're currently in jail or in the hospital, because if you're in jail or in the hospital or any other kind of facility, you're not going to be eligible for SSI for that particular month. So by way of example, if you've been approved for SSI and you're getting benefits, but you have the unfortunate happenstance of being arrested and placed in jail, you will not get SSI for the months that you are in jail. But once you're out of jail, your payments will resume. The same is true for a hospital. If you're in the hospital for a month or more, your payments may be suspended, but once you're out of the facility, your payments will resume. Now, don't worry if you go into the hospital, you're in there for 5, 10 days, whatever, that's not going to affect anything. It's if you've been in the hospital for 30 days or more. Now, this is where the two programs are the same. They both define a disability the very same way. It's exactly the same. Excuse me while I reach for the clock. It's exactly the same way to assess disability under SSDI and SSI. And that's what we're going to deal with next. The word disability has an obvious definition, but you know, the definition is different depending on what government agency is using it. And so we're going to talk today about a disability as it's defined by Social Security. That may not be the same way that HUD defines a disability, or the way that your landlord might define a disability or a handicap. Every agency does it somewhat differently. We're talking today just about Social Security. Figuring out whether you are a disabled person entitled to benefits is a 5-step process. The first step is whether you're working, or to put it in the language of the Social Security office, are you doing substantial gainful activity? It's work. I mean, are you working? How much are you working? And what this really looks at is What are your day-to-day activities? If you're working at a store and you're working 40 hours a week, you're engaged in substantial gainful activity and you are not eligible, or you are not disabled. You might have a considerable impairment or health condition that is awful, but if you're working 40 hours a week, Social Security says you are not disabled. Now, remember when I said you can still do some work and get SSI? I'm really talking about this. Substantial gainful activity is anything that where you earn over $1,310 for the month. So let's say you have a part-time job at the store and you make $1,000 a month. You are still going to receive SSI. It might be a lesser amount because remember, they base everything on income, but you will still get SSI. If you work at the store part-time, but your earnings are $1,500 a month, you're not going to get SSI benefits for that month. They do have a system in place that if you start to go to work, you can kind of gradually build up. It's basically a way to get people back into the workforce if they can. And so they overlook certain months and that sort of, it's called the Ticket to Work program. But I'm often asked, how much can I earn and still get SSI? And for 2021, that number is 1310, okay? Now, substantial gainful activity isn't just what you earn. Let's say that you don't have a job where you get paid, but you volunteer 40 hours a week at your church's office. Well, even if you're not getting paid, you're engaged in 40 hours of work each week, and Social Security may consider that to be substantial gainful activity, and you won't be considered disabled. The second step is, do you have a severe impairment? And a severe impairment is a medically determinable physical or mental impairment. It includes emotional problems, learning problems. So medically determinable physical or mental impairment. And it has to either be expected to result in death, or which has lasted or will last for more than 12 months. If you have some terrible impairment that affects your daily life, but it's something that comes and goes, it doesn't last for 12 continuous months, then you're not going to be considered disabled. I have arthritis, and some days, I can barely walk, but it's not a continuous problem, so I would not be considered disabled, despite being really PO'd every time I feel that way. The second thing, it has to be medically determinable. And that means it's got to be something more than just you think that you have this impairment. Hopefully, if you have some medical impairment, mental health issues, whatever your health issues are, hopefully you're getting some assistance or treatment from a healthcare provider. And that can be excellent evidence of there being a medically determinable physical or mental impairment. What doesn't fly is when you say, I have migraines. And when they say, well, have you seen a doctor about it? Nope, I just know they're migraines. Well, your opinion might be right, but it's not a medical opinion. And so you need to find out how to get that kind of proof together. Let's go on to step 3. Step 3 is something called the listings. Now, this is the strangest part of federal regulations, I think, that you could find, because the listings is literally a grocery list of all the things that could possibly be wrong with a human being's body and mental health. And it supposedly lists all of the impairments that are expected to result in death or which are permanent. So it might say something like, you know, you have cancer, and that can be a listing if it meets criteria A, B, C, and D. Meaning, and those criteria might be, you know, you've had surgery within 12 months, you've you know, tried various, or your doctor has had you try various therapies that haven't worked. You have a prognosis of death, that sort of thing. So it's a listing of all the terrible things that can be wrong with a human body. And Social Security will look at your medical records and figure out if you fit one of these listings. If you fit one of these listings, you're disabled, and they don't go any further in the process of this 5-step thing. If you meet one of the listings, boom, you're disabled. Now, the listings are very severe. So in my arthritis example, I would not meet a listing because the criteria for disability due to something like arthritis talks about the inability to walk without assistance, to do other certain activities without assistance, don't respond to medication, that sort of thing. So it's a very high standard, and very few people actually meet the listings. But Social Security will look at the listings, look at your medical records, and see if you fit into one of those. Let's say that you don't fit one of the listings, and that's most of the cases that go through Social Security. They don't meet a listing, and so they move on to step 4. And step 4 is really a question about, can you go back to the work that you used to do? In my example about the store worker, can that person go back to the, if tomorrow, if they offered her a job, could she go back to the store, do the same kind of work she was doing before she became disabled? If the answer is yes, then she's not disabled. And all of it turns on this thing called residual functional capacity. And this is what Social Security decides you can do based on all your limitations. And I've listed all the 5 categories that they use: sedentary work, medium work, light work, heavy work, very heavy work. Basically, Social Security will look at the medical evidence. They will have some vocational expert look at your record, look at what your past work has been, and decide whether you can handle something like medium work. And medium work is work that and I'm going to misstate this because they're all so different, but it's basically something that you can frequently lift up to 10 pounds, occasionally lift something of 20 pounds. You can walk a distance of 50 feet while carrying something, that sort of stuff. Very heavy work, you can lift something of, weighing 100 pounds or more. You can, be on your feet for 10 hours at a time, that sort of thing. So they look at all the details of your medical record and what the vocational expert says, and they say, well, we think that she can do medium work. And they put you in that category. So back to my store lady. She can't go back to her past work at the store because she can't stand for very long, and she has trouble lifting anything at all. But somebody at Social Security or the Division of Disability Determinations decides she can lift 15 pounds once in a while, 20 pounds, or 15 pounds on a regular basis, 20 pounds on an occasional basis. So let's say she can do medium work. She can't do her past work, but she could do other jobs that fall in the category of medium work. Okay. Then they go on to step 5. And this is called the grids. In the grids, This is another kind of weird thing in the federal regulations. It's a chart. And what they do is, in my store lady examples, let's say she can do medium work. They go to the chart for medium work, and then they look at these factors to see where she fits in the chart. What's her age? What's her level of education? What was the skill level of the store work that she used to do? And did the skills she have at the store, can they be transferred to other types of work? And each of these is a factor on this chart. So they find her age, they find her education, they find her past work, skill level, whether they're transferable, and they look on the chart and say, boom, she's disabled because she fits that category. Or they say, boom, she's not disabled. It's a very strange kind of process, but it nonetheless fits a lot of people. Now, the grids are not so cut and dry because there's so many things that fall between the cracks. And that's why up in the corner, which I think on my screen I cover it there, non-exertional impairments are considered. So let's consider my poor store lady. They decide that she can do medium work. They've looked at the grids and they say, yes, she can do work, so she is not disabled. But then they have to consider the kinds of impairments that don't affect her ability to lift and walk, the physical abilities. They have to consider she also is being treated for depression and anxiety, or she takes so much medicine that she is sleepy all day. So when they take those things into account, the grids might not apply at all. Isn't this complicated? And that's why you need a lawyer to help you with a hearing. What we'll do next month is how you prepare for that hearing and how you prove your claim for disability benefits based on all the factors that I just went over. It's very typical for, let me see if I can go backwards a little bit. It's very important to make the application, let Social Security figure out what you might be eligible for, and they will make their determination and send you a letter. Most of the time, people are turned down at that first step. Don't be discouraged. When you get the letter that says you've been turned down, it will tell you you can appeal. You can ask for what's called a reconsideration. The reconsideration is where you say, hey, I disagree with the decision you made. I am disabled. You should look at this again. They will look at it again, and it's very likely that they will stick with their decision that you're not disabled. But again, do not be discouraged, because if you get a letter that says you've been denied reconsideration, your next step is to ask for a hearing before an administrative law judge. And that's a great opportunity to present your best case. It's very helpful if you have a representative there at the hearing with you. This is a service that legal aid provides in cases where we think that we can be successful for the individual. And so if you are going to head to a hearing before an administrative law judge, please contact us or some other attorney who can help you with your Social Security claim. It's really important that you have things prepared in a certain way for the hearing. You don't have to have an attorney. You could actually have a friend assist you at the hearing, but it's so much better if you have an attorney who knows what that system works or how that system works and what the judges are looking for. So the other thing I'll say about those appeals is that there are deadlines. When you get a letter from Social Security, always, always, always read it to see if there's a deadline that you have to meet. Always. and stick to that deadline. Now, next month, I forget which Wednesday of that month, we're going to be doing the presentation about proving your claim for disability benefits. And I really encourage you to participate with that. If you or any member of your family is involved with the Social Security process, this would be a great thing for them to listen in on. So thank you so much for attending today's session. I don't see any questions, but if you do have need for our assistance, please contact us at 239-775-4555 or in Immokalee at 239-657-7442. We really look forward to helping you. Being disabled should not mean that you suffer financially. So let's, get you the benefits to which you are entitled. Thank you so much to the grantors that sponsor us, that help us run our program. We appreciate them very much and all their support. And thank you very much for today. Goodbye.